On today's episode, we talk about the change makers that we lost in 2020. These are people who have just had a great and a powerful impact on our lives, Janae.
Absolutely. When I look at so many of these individuals, they really have made America a better place.
Yes.
And because they have been here, we are all better. And I say that really because their fight was for a fight for equality and really equity and fairness. And I believe that their work, their sacrifice has made this country closer to the ideals of which it was founded. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful. And I just really hope that the work that I do helps to extend their legacy.
So stay with us today as we talk about Charles Evers, Bruce Boynton, Joseph Lowery, C.T. Vivian, and John Lewis on today's episode of All Roads Lead To with Al and Janae. This is All Roads Lead To with Al and Janae.
The place where we share and talk about the people, places, and passions
that have impacted us on the road of life. Well, as we talk today about so many people who are and really have been change makers in our lives, it's kind of a trite saying. It's not really a trite saying, but you can be the change that you want to see. And each of these people that we're going to talk about today did not start out to be change makers, but really allowed life circumstance to allow them just to kind of step up to the plate and step up to the moment when their time came. And it's interesting how, as Christian believers, we believe in providence and that God has kind of an intersection of time and place for people to be. But in our faith tradition and our belief, we believe that God kind of just allows things to be, and God allowed each of these individuals to be born and placed in a time where they would indeed be people who made a change and made a difference. I want to start off today talking about Charles Evers, who we lost in 2020. Charles Evers is the brother of Medgar Evers, who was the field secretary for the NAACP in Mississippi, who was assassinated in front of his home in just a horrible and brutal way in 1965. That just is amazing, the events that took place during that year. But Charles Evers actually kind of took the baton of carrying on his brother's work, which he was already involved in, but ran for Congress, also ran for mayor and became mayor there of a town in Mississippi. And he was actually in the ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles in 1968, the night that Bobby Kennedy was assassinated there. So we kind of stayed close to the front lines. And one of, I guess, our connections with Charles Evers is that he was, I believe, a neighbor of our good friends and mentors, Charles and Vivian Joseph, when they lived in Mississippi. So they would tell us stories about Charles Evers, the other civil rights individuals who were prominent in the movement at that time.
Wow. And I think so much of that connection that you make just reminds me of how these really were ordinary people who stepped up to do extraordinary things. Yeah. And it just is humbling and also empowering that, you know, it doesn't take someone, like you're saying, who was charted out on a course, or had some sort of ambition, but just really took advantage and really or tried to make a difference, not necessarily an advantage, but really take it, just take opportunity where it was, and to see how they could really, in a sense, be self-sacrificing to help make the lives of someone else better. Absolutely. And when you mention our mentors, I think about them. They kind of introduced me to the concept of the Green Book, and in his discussions and talks to us about traveling through the South and how, you could only stop at certain places and you had to know where to stop. And, there was a book that kind of gave, Black folks a guide of where and who. Sometimes it was actually just people's homes that you could, that you could stop through when there were no hotels available. You couldn't stop everywhere for gas. You could eat at, a lot of local places. they didn't serve.
Yeah.
So you had to know, and you're coming from outside the area. You didn't want to make a mistake.
I remember when we went to visit my brother, when he lived in, he and his wife lived in Mississippi. He took us around by the place where Medgar Evers lived, where his house was, and you could sense the intensity of what it would have been like at that time.
So true.
I remember we were driving down the road, and at one point in time, he said, "Just look at this," and he turned his lights out, and the road was just total pitch black on either side. And so you could almost feel the trepidation and the tension in the air of what was there. And so those people who lived and really worked and operated during those times, who were change makers, they lived courageously.
Absolutely.
And there were so many people who are known, but so many people who are unknown. And Charles Evers represents the best of those people. Absolutely. So salute, hail, and farewell to Charles Evers. We also want to recognize a person in the name of Mr. Bruce Boynton. Bruce Boynton, who passed away in 2020. Bruce Boynton is the son of Amelia Boynton. I believe she became Amelia Boynton Robinson, who was one of the pioneers of the Selma movement. But Bruce Boynton is really one of the reasons why there was the Freedom Rise that took place. Bruce Boynton was a student at Howard in 1958. He's coming back from Howard, coming back home to Selma. Again, born, raised, kind of whole life centers around Selma. He's coming back home during one of the breaks from school, and the bus that he happens to be riding on, from what I understand, stopped in Richmond, Virginia. He is just hungry, so he decides to get a cup of coffee and a hamburger at the place wherever I believe it was Greyhound, stopped. He went there. Again, it was supposed to be a whites only. He ends up getting arrested. The fine was, guess what the fine was? $10. $10. But again, his case gets litigated in court. It ends up going to the Supreme Court, and others find out about what had happened to him on the bus lines. And that's when the idea came for there to be the Freedom Rides, to actually test the legal documents that have been sent up and really have been passed through the Supreme Court. So Bruce Boynton was really a son and a father of the movement all at the same time.
And that's something. And I always love the quote of his mother, people say, we're standing on the shoulders of those who come forward. And she said, get off my shoulders and do the work.
Wow.
And he lived that. But I also think back to so many of those foot soldiers in Selma, had the privilege of meeting some of them. And I think it's those who return back and didn't go to school and then take their knowledge outside of those areas, but came back home. That really made such an impact, and so much of that was needed, and it continues really to be needed in a lot of ways for some of the local work. Often, we kind of go to some of the urban centers sometimes, but often it's those local areas that even today, still need sometimes for folks to return back. And so he's I think an awesome example of that.
And in saying that, I want to salute the work of, I believe it's State Senator Sanders in Alabama, in the Selma area, who is really responsible for the Jubilee that takes place every first weekend in March, and his wife, and I believe he was one of the ones who first announced Bruce Boynton's death. So there are still people there who are putting in the work, living the life, and putting their lives on the line as well. So salute, hail, and farewell to Bruce Boynton. Now I want to just shift to another individual, and I remember waking up and seeing the news of his death in March, I believe, of 2020. That in the person of Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowery. Joe Lowery, just one of the gigantic personalities
so colorful.
of the civil rights movement. Now, hey, I'm a preacher. I'm the son of a preacher. I know preachers. Preachers have personality.
Yeah.
And preachers can be a mess sometimes. I mean,
people are people, right?
Preachers are people too. But he was just such a gigantic personality. But it's easy sometimes for people to get caught up in personality.
Okay.
To say that he's only articulate or he's a good preacher. But Joseph Lowery was a brilliant mind.
All right. Huntsville, Alabama.
Yes, born.
That's right. That's where we went to school. But that's right. Where he was born. Yeah.
And so, Dr. Lowery and what he did, especially with his life's work, it intersected with the civil rights movement in the 60s, but it didn't end there.
Right.
He was still president of the SCLC. I believe it was Dr. King, then Ralph Abernathy, then Dr. Joe Lowery, for quite a number of years, and was really in the forefront of the movement to kind of break down the barriers in South Africa. He was still at the front, the apartheid movement. He was still kind of pushing towards the front of still just for fair housing, decent wages.
Yes.
I can remember seeing him marching with his collar and jeans on in different times. He was at the forefront of helping to push for the King holiday.
Absolutely.
And so Dr. Lowery was just one of those people who was there.
Absolutely. And I think about his offering the prayer.
Oh, man. Well, you know what? And before we get to the prayer, though, remember in 2007, speaking of the Selma Jubilee, that was when it was the kind of the speculation of who was going to run for president and who was going to be there. Right. And so in Selma that year, Hillary Clinton was there, Barack Obama was there. And it was at the service that took place at Brown's Chapel, AME, that Dr. Lowery began to talk about, well, there's bad crazy and there's good crazy.
He did.
And he really started talking to tell people that it's okay for us to believe that we can elect somebody black as president. And that was really a seminal and a signal moment. That was kind of a hinge moment at that time that really helped to galvanize really the black community and really the other communities that Barack Obama was a viable candidate and could be elected.
It's a good point because so many civil rights leaders had been close to the Clintons.
Yes.
And so there was still tension as to who to support, as well as really the viability of President Obama. Well, at that time, Senator Obama's campaign.
So that moment in March of 2007, that is a moment that really made a difference for what ended up becoming history. And so, he kind of became a surrogate for the campaign. Dr. Lowery did as well. And then January 20, 2009, we were there, and I guess we'll do a whole nother show on that. But when it came to the benediction, I mean, he only did it as Dr. Joe Lowery could do it. It's talking about time where black will not be told to get back.
That's right.
Where brown can stick around. Where yellow will be mellow. And the red man can get ahead, man. And the white man will do white will do what's right. I mean, it was only as he could do. A classic. And at the end, everybody was saying amen and laughing as well. I had a chance to hear him preach in person one time. He was the opening speaker. I believe it was 1996 for the annual Pastors Evangelism Conference that takes place at Oakwood University. He was one of the speakers there, and he was friends with a lot of the pastors that we knew in the Atlanta area, and even coming on through the years. So that was kind of my connection, my little intersection with Joe Lowery. I got to see him probably from about 12 rows back in the church.
It was close to history.
Yeah. Close to history. So as we kind of center this even around Selma is located in Dallas County in Alabama. And one of the major pushes to really get voting rights extended to Dallas County. And really, when you look at the history of what took place there, there's so many things, and maybe we'll do another program going in depth about that. One of the seminal moments that was caught on videotape was when Sheriff Jim Clark was confronted on the steps of the Dallas County Courthouse by a gentleman who was talking clearly, who was talking without fear, who was talking with bravery and conviction. And that is in the person of Dr. C.T. Vivian.
And turn your back on us, but you can't turn your back on justice.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it was powerful.
Yes. And if you get a chance to look it up on YouTube, maybe we'll put it in the show notes. But it was a powerful confrontation. And it's almost between, good, evil, one side and the other that was there on the Dallas County Courthouse. And that was in the person of Dr. C.T. Vivian, who was literally punched.
It was, his words were so riveting. I think that it and it was defying, but yet respectful. And so it was there was nothing really that was criminal or provoking in that way, but it actually, because he was challenging power, it elicited that response that was televised. And it was in that and so
right there on film, on tape, and it was seen around the nation, and around the world. If you ever seen the Eyes on the Prize series, it's one of the hallmark things in that series. But Dr. C.T. Vivian, again, that was a moment for him, but that was not his only moment. Again, another preacher, another person of the movement, close contact with Dr. King. But who just did not allow things to stop then.
Right, because I think what was so dynamic is that, he could have been forceful. He could have, used bodily force, which would have been seen as being criminal, and it would have seemed to, or somehow being, improper. But by using the force of words and just truth to power and just literally just speaking in courage and bravery, it really exemplified, I think, in what he really believed in the nonviolent approach. And I remember a quote of him, something to the effect of that we won't allow violence to destroy nonviolence.
Wow.
And so he spoke to power. He spoke truth to power. His, as you describe, his presence, his stature of not cowering, but just remaining there and saying, you can turn your back on us, because there was like a shifting and the sheriff was, walking away from me. He's like, you can turn your back on us, but you can't turn your back on the idea of justice. He just kept, really just speaking to it, to the point where he got so agitated. And it was almost like the gall or the audacity of you to continue to speak to me in this way. But it really, I think, identified his humanity. And it brought, I think, a humanity to the cause. That people, he was really saying, we are citizens, and these voting rights, we will achieve. And you will not be able to continue to defy us, our citizenship, in our rights as citizens. And so hearing these words and being able, I think, and that's the beauty to me of Charles Hamilton Houston and so many who had strategy, because as you described, once laws were changed, then they actually had to be, you had to have individuals who were courageous enough to put them in practice. Because being on the books was very different than actually being exercised. And so there was so much of this that was really, required the courage of people. And so that's just one moment. And I think he was really an example. I think in tribute, many were saying, that we're better because of him. Absolutely. And that, he really was an anchor to the movement and to the cause of voting rights and so much of the equity that they were fighting for during those times, and that continue to be.
And on that day, Jim Clark laid hands on him.
Absolutely.
Knocked him down, but he got right back up.
He knocked him. Yeah, he like you said, he punched him in the face and
knocked him right back. But he got right back up and kept on talking and kept on. With same courage and same conviction.
And didn't retaliate.
Did not retaliate and did not allow an inch of hate to come into his mind, heart, or his spirit.
Right.
That would allow him. And he saw and experienced a lot. And imagine, and just think about, that is what was caught on tape when Sheriff Jim Clark and the rest knew that people were watching. Just think of all the stuff that took place and that happened when they knew nobody was anywhere.
So true. So true.
So we pay tribute and honor to the life, to the ministry, and to the humanity of Dr. C.T. Vivian. You know, it's an interesting thing that sometimes in history there are parallels that happen. And so many years ago, two of our founding fathers of the United States happened to die on the same day. I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Well, the ironic thing is that C.T. Vivian and another person who I believe we can also call a modern founding father
of our democracy,
in the person, yes, absolutely, of John Robert Lewis. Mm-hmm. John Robert Lewis. Those two towering giants of men happened to die on the very same day. So John Lewis, we definitely want to pay tribute to as one who was a change maker who we lost in 2020.
Yeah, you saw him fight even these last years, and it's just kind of hard to even talk about him in a past tense.
Yes.
But so much of his legacy is still present, and I really feel a challenge for all of us to carry it forward, because I think, as you kind of described, the work that he did is a part of making our country the place that it was intended to be for all people. And I think it really does help us to live out the ideals of our democracy. And that is, equity and fairness, voting. I think when I think of him, voting rights and his work, his courage.
Courage.
The courage that we see from early on. I think we talked about even, in challenging the status quo as he knew it as a child.
Yeah, challenging the status quo as a child by being willing to kind of even go away from home.
Right.
Because his family, they were kind of supportive of him, but were kind of resistive because of the potential backlash that could happen from him being in the newspapers. They had really achieved a feat. I believe it was they have a couple 100-acre farm in rural Alabama, and the fear that could be taken away or somehow just not them not being able to live out their dreams, at least with that, was one of the things. And he showed courage. And again, I remember reading in one of the books about him that his family, they were supportive of him. They always loved him and encouraged him, but were kind of fearful of what would happen as a result of him being in the forefront.
Well, I think that's the sense that we get from his later, challenge of getting into good trouble, because the concept was to stay out of trouble. Mm-hmm. That, people of color, Black people were, the goal in a sense was not to get into trouble, in a sense to stay on your side of the tracks, to stay in your area, not to have conflict with anyone, particularly of white people. And so by him looking to defy and to dismantle and to challenge Jim Crow, he was definitely going to be getting into the type of trouble that they knew could cost his life, could cost, like you're saying, the security of their family, the investments and the sacrifices that enabled them to even be able to be landowners. Yeah. Like they knew all of that was in jeopardy. And they had seen, because part of the tactics of that era were fear. So you see people who were made examples of when they challenged or when they got into quote unquote good trouble. And so I think the courage that he had, though, is that he had a sense of principle that things weren't going to improve, that things weren't going to change if someone didn't step up. Yeah. And so that's what I think he's calling us to do in our, in getting into good trouble. That's the challenge. And he led by example. He
definitely did. One of the things that I was amazed to know, and I remember reading this years ago, but it was brought back this past summer with the news of his death, is that he actually wrote to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was pastor of Dexter Avenue in Montgomery, because John Lewis would listen to his sermons on the radio. Wow. And heard about what was going on and said, hey, I'd like to be a part of the movement. So Dr. King actually responded to him, sent him a bus ticket brought him to Montgomery, and when he walked into his office, said, this is John Lewis, the boy from Troy. And so he was, showing willingness to kind of not only push the boundaries, but a willingness and an openness to learn as well. And another big step for him was going to Nashville, first going to American Baptist College there. And again, as we as Christian believers believe that as God would allow and as providence would allow, that when he arrived at American Baptist College in Nashville, his roommates were Bernard Lafayette and James Bevel.
Wow.
Now, again, these guys are preachers. And I mean, hey, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher. I know preachers and everything. So I know these guys were having a whole lot of jokes and a whole lot of fun. But the creative energy that those three minds had, and just that they all kind of came together and happened to cross lines at the same time at American Baptist College in Nashville, was something that was amazing. And then John Lewis goes on to show courage in being willing to participate in the sit-in movement in Nashville.
Yes.
And learning from people like Dr. James Lawson, who just gave an eloquent, what I would call a eulogy, really, but it was remarks at his service in Atlanta at Ebenezer Baptist. Dr. James Lawson, who is still, I think, one of the brilliant people of the movement who doesn't get enough credit for it. And Kelly Miller Smith, pastor of a local church there, he was willing to learn from these individuals. And as a part of his learning, also put himself in the place where he could be involved as well.
Absolutely. And that goes to challenging the economic structure that, the sit-ins were challenging, the contributions that the dollar, that the students and the Black dollar had in the city, and coupling that with the legal challenges. And so they were kind of doubling the efforts on the city in terms of the level of protest. So this was activism in a way that we hadn't seen, where it was challenging in the courts as well as, the economic pull. And we saw that starting in some degree really with the bus boycott.
Yes.
And so now with the student sit-in, but there was so much also that was required of restraint from them, because they were receiving and really conduits of violence, but yet were not to retaliate. And so that, kind of leads to the student movement.
And so that becomes really a middle piece for John Lewis, because now he's involved in starting SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Stokely Carmichael and his group are now coming in there and saying, hey, this nonviolent stuff, it's not going to have any legs on it. It's not going to be really where our future is. And so John Lewis then again had to show courage by saying, no, I believe that this can work.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there was the tension of, what is the gain in continuing, in a sense, to be the recipients of violence, but not, asserting or responding in kind. And so I think there was that challenge. And I think the initial piece of that was kind of underlining, what are our principles? What are we standing for? And I think that's something that I think, because, there is the natural human reaction of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, in a sense. But I think that John Lewis answered a question overall that I think he said the means and the outcome should be consistent. And so if we're looking to build community, if we're looking to grow, if we're looking to strengthen, if we're looking to find equity, then our means for finding it should have a similar result. And so I think that's was his support of really looking at nonviolence, looking at ways of uplifting to be a part of the means that you're looking to reach these outcomes. And so I think that was really very, I think, just wise, even at a young age, to accept that and to see the value that some of the older generation was promoting in terms of those who were looking for nonviolent means to equity and, and to the end of Jim Crow.
Absolutely. And so as a result, on March 7, 1965, when you see John Lewis at the head of that line leading the marchers over the bridge in Selma, he went because he was still committed to nonviolence. There was a big, big tussle going on the night before and even the hours before. And they told him, John Lewis, if you go, you are representing yourself. you are not representing the organization. And so as a result of those tensions, we know what happened on the bridge in Selma. And I think sometimes, I know I've said this to you and I've said it to others, I think it's easy for us to make John Lewis a mascot only of what took place in Selma. But this man's entire life was a courageous life of standing up, of not resisting. And so we see him go on from there. He continues to work closely with Dr. King, because actually he got voted out of the leadership of SNCC, the organization that he founded.
Right, but he was one of the founders of, And you had to mention even, I mean, that took a lot to have to find a way to rebound and kind of make the lemonade out of lemons. Yes. Absolutely. And I think you made a point sometime, I remember even in how he responded in the to the direction of A. Philip Randolph and as being one of the speakers.
Absolutely. Yes. He was there at March on Washington. August 28th, 1963. He's there. He's got this fire and brimstone speech. I mean, he's just ready to tell it like it is and let the chips fall where they may. And A. Philip Randolph and Dr. King pulled him backstage and said, John, we're trying to get a bill passed. You gotta work with us here. Work with us here. And it wasn't what he was wanting to do, but what he was willing to do. And again, learn from his leaders, A. Philip Randolph, Dr. King, and others. Who were there. So
kind of looking at the big picture down the road, not to be too incendiary. And to help aid the passage of 64. And it did.
So there he is. 1968 in June. Dr. King has been assassinated. He goes to work closely with Robert Kennedy. Again, he is right there in the Ambassador Hotel. And one of the last people that Robert Kennedy spoke to before going down to make his acceptance speech was John Lewis. And he kind of says that he joked with him and says, hey, if you had worked a little harder, John, we could have gotten more Negroes to come out and vote for us. But he was hopeful for the future. And then what happened downstairs in the kitchen happened. John Lewis goes on to go back to Atlanta, and he kind of gets hooked up by Zernona Clayton.
Yes, and I was looking at his the story of his meeting his wife and the matchmaking that took place. His wife Lillian, and they were married from like 1968 to her passing in 2012. I mean, just really, I think that's something that we often don't highlight, but that is just really an example of just enduring and just faithful, and enduring marriage. It's just a really beautiful example of that.
So they go back and they're living in Atlanta. Jimmy Carter is elected president and gives him a agency job. He does it for a little while, but then ends up coming back to Atlanta running for city council. And again, one of the places where he showed courage again is that during his time in city council, President Carter was looking at a particular piece of land in Atlanta. I read this story, I believe, in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, to place his library there. But it would mean that houses would be knocked out in order to place the highways and the entrances and the exits that would be needed there. And John Lewis said, no, this is going to affect too many people to go there. So who should happen to call? His old friend from the movement, Andrew Young, says, hey, John, we need you on this one. We need you. And he says, hey, Mr. Mayor, Andrew Young is mayor of Atlanta at that time. No, I can't vote for you. Vote with you on this. And so there's more back and forth talking. And then another time John Lewis talked about his phone rang. And this time it was Jimmy Carter himself calling and saying, look, hey, John, I need you. For this one, he said, Mr. President, hey, I love you, I support you, but I can't vote for this. And again, showing courage, just again, all the way through his life. And we know that eventually in 1986, he was elected. In 87, became congressman from Atlanta. And that was after a tough battle with his friend, the man who was actually the best man at his wedding.
Wow.
The best man at his wedding. Julian Bond.
Wow.
Ended up just a tough battle. And it's just kind of sometimes what happens in life and in politics, and it's unfortunate that sometimes there are casualties that do happen.
But there's so limited opportunities,
yes.
I think, too, sometimes for individuals where you're pitting, qualified people, particularly. I think when you're looking for people in positions of color, often sometimes you don't. It's only a few that actually kind of get through.
That's true. Yeah,
really, really unfortunate. But Julian Bond went on to be very impactful and influential.
Absolutely. And John Lewis served in Congress until the day of his death, and became what I believe Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the conscience of the Congress. Yes. And should be known again for not just one thing, but his enduring voice and his enduring character. I never had the opportunity to meet him in person, but every person that I have heard that has met him in person just said he literally was just a humble, really good person. Yeah, down. Don't let the accent fool you. Right. He was a smart man, a brilliant man, had his own thoughts and convictions, but really, really just a prince of a man. And although not tall in stature, he is a giant in his nature. Yeah. And what he did for you, what he did for me, what he did for so many. And just appreciate the life and the legacy of Congressman John Robert Lewis. So we thank you so much for joining us for today's episode where we've been talking about change makers. We've got a couple more episodes where we're going to just highlight some individuals who were change makers. So please subscribe, tell a friend about All Roads Lead To with Al and Janae.
We are so glad to share our podcast with you. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on social media.
So please listen, share, and tell a friend about All Roads Lead To with Al and Janae, the place where we talk about the people, the places, and the passions that have impacted us along the road of life.